In this video, we will learn about the carbon cycle. As the term says, it is the cyclic movement of carbon in our atmosphere, and it can be defined as a series of chemical reaction in which the carbon as CO2 is removed from the atmosphere by the green plants and then used by all the living organisms in their body, and finally it has to return to the atmosphere, and since it returns back to the original place, it is termed as the cycle process or carbon cycle. Now we know that carbon is the building material in all the organic compound, that is carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, nucleic acids, etc. So we can see there are three reservoirs of carbon in nature, that is atmosphere, ocean, petroleum and coal. Now if we take the carbon, the atmosphere is the main reservoir of carbon in the form of CO2. Some CO2 is also available in dissolved form in the water, but most of the CO2 enters the living world through a process known as photosynthesis. Living world, so it has to enter by carbon fixation. Now after the fixation, it becomes part of organic compounds. So organic compounds so formed are transferred to herbivores from the plants, and when carnivores eat herbivores, they also get carbon into their body. Now during the process of respiration, so decay of dead parts of plants and animals, and also during combustion of fossil fuels and wood, CO2 will return back to the atmosphere. Because of the carbon cycle, the proportion of CO2 in the atmosphere remains the same. Now if we take the step by step details of carbon cycle, the first is atmospheric CO2 fixation. So this is done by the green plants. They are known as producers. They take up CO2 and convert it into the carbohydrates, that is the glucose, by a process that is photosynthesis. Now green plants can be land plants or aquatic plants. Aquatic plants make use of CO2 dissolved in water and they perform photosynthesis. Apart from this, there will be some dissolved CO2 present in the water, and some of the dissolved CO2 comes from limestone, that is calcium carbonate, and other carbonate rocks. Now these green plants and their parts are eaten by animals, that is consumers. It could be primary consumer or it can be secondary consumer, omnivores, etc. So carbon is transferred from plants to animals from one trophic level to other as food. And this transfer of food, that is the glucose or carbon, from one trophic level to another trophic level is termed as the food chain. Now the carbon dioxide is given out or given back to the atmosphere by a process that is respiration, which is seen in both plants and animals. It is also released into the atmosphere by the decay of dead plants, animals and of organic matter. Thus we can tell that plants and animals release CO2 into atmosphere in two ways. One is by respiration, the other is by decaying of their dead body, and this occurs with the help of the microbes. And some of the dead plants and animals get buried under the earth, and due course of time takes place on them and certain reactions occur and they change into fossil fuels such as coal, mineral oil, and this takes several years, millions of years, and this is a very slow chemical change. Now this mineral oil gives us diesel, petrol and kerosene, and when we use these fossil fuels, mean that we burn them, so this fuel releases CO2 and the CO2 comes back to the atmosphere. Now CO2 is also released when we burn wood, coal, etc. Now if we see, CO2 is also released in huge quantities by volcanic eruptions. It is also released by decomposition of carbonate rocks buried under the earth. When acid rain falls on the carbonate rocks, CO2 gas is produced very slowly, and CO2 is also released by action of bacteria and fungi on shells and skeleton of animals. So we can tell that So the processes which remove CO2 from the atmosphere are photosynthesis, formation of carbonate rocks, formation of fossil fuels, formation of inorganic carbonate shells and skeleton. Similarly, the processes which release or put back CO2 into atmosphere include respiration by plants and animals, decay of dead plants and animals, burning of coal, wood and fossil fuels such as kerosene, petrol, diesel, etc., volcanic eruptions, and also action of acid rain, bacteria and fungi on carbonate rocks and inorganic carbonate shells will release CO2 back to atmosphere. Now, if we summarize how it looks, so first CO2 exists as a gas in the air. By the process of photosynthesis, it will be fixed into the world of living organism, that is carbon compounds in plants. Plants are eaten up by animals. Both will die one day, and when they decay, they release the CO2 back to the atmosphere by the action of bacteria and fungi. So this process will give back CO2. Other than that, when they are living, both of them will respire and give back CO2 into the atmosphere. Now, animals also release urine and feces, and this also is prone for bacterial action. And when bacteria acts on urine and feces, they also release CO2. Now, some of the carbon can be found in the fossil fuels. So, carbon compounds in microorganisms will get used up, and it will also release CO2. So, carbon compounds in fossil fuels through the process of combustion will come back to the atmosphere. Now, there can be imbalance in carbon cycle if there is some step which is taking at a higher rate compared to the other. Now, these days, fossil fuels, that is coal and petroleum, are being used on a massive scale in our home, industries, and for also transportation purpose. Due to this, concentration of CO2 is increasing steadily in the atmosphere. This excess CO2 cannot be consumed by plants during photosynthesis, and it keeps getting accumulated in the atmosphere. And carbon dioxide traps the sun's radiation as it is a greenhouse gas and does not allow it to escape from the atmosphere, that is heat energy. So this will cause global warming and greenhouse effect. Now this trapping of heat energy can increase the temperature of the earth. Any slight rise in temperature may cause polar ice caps to melt, and melting of polar ice caps means it will flow to the sea, and the water will flow to the sea and cause the rise in sea level, and thus submerging majority of the land, that the sea coast or highlands, etc. I hope this topic is clear to you. Thank you.